You'll definitely want your Bibles. We've been identifying biblical poetry, talking about reading biblical poetry, and today I want to specifically just kind of look at different types of poetry in the Bible, Isaiah, Job, and such. So we are going to be looking at biblical poetry today, technically reading. So as a review, we've done all those things, and I think this is our 5th class on biblical poetry. And we've looked at parallelism, which is the main feature of poetry that the Bible has. And we looked at a few Psalms. We looked at Psalms 1 and 2, and also Psalm 19. And we recently looked at and defined some terms regarding poetic structures in the Bible. We looked at the envelope structure, we looked at word and sound play, chiasms, and acrostics. All poetic devices that give a structure and sometimes, typically, meaning into the Holy Writ. So I'd like to spend some time in various types of poetry scripture. So Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Isaiah, and even Job. Psalm 119 are examples of various types of flavors of poetry that the Bible has to offer. And so I thought we'd warm up with the first bit of poetry in the Bible. And that is Genesis 1:27. It's just one verse. Genesis 1:27. So, I'm going to read it to you in the King James Version, and you'll notice the poetic syntax that the King James includes here with Genesis 1:27. We're on the first chapter of the Bible. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So what are some obvious, what's some observations that we can make hearing this or reading it?
Well, in English, him and them rhyme.
Him and them rhyme.
In English.
Him and them rhyme.
In the English.
Created he him, created he them, male and female. What are some observations we can get just from what this says? If it does anything, why would this be
like the
poetry?
first 2 lines are almost the same words, just rearranged.
Mm-hmm. Created man in his own image. God created him in the image. Yeah, like different, yeah. So what makes the image of God?
Male and female. Both.
Male and female. Mm-hmm. So as I noted, the KJV is king here as far as the poetic diction used to translate the Hebrew, and which I like that. Most of the Bible does have a rhythm and a certain syntax to it. Here's what the Hebrew original sounds like. Vayibra Elohim et ha'adam b'tsalmo. B'tselem Elohim bara oto. Zechar v'nikba bara otam. And so we see these different words. Let me read it again. Vayibra Elohim et ha'adam b'tsalmo. B'tselem Elohim bara oto. We almost get a rhyme there. Zechar v'nikba bara otam. And so we can see the key words here. Elohim. Tselem is the word for image. We have B'tsalmo, and then the next line starts with B'tselem in the image. And bara oto, created he them. Bara otam, created he them. And so that's why it's poetry. It's kind of using saying similar things in a different way, but also intensifies it by giving us additional information on it as well. Comments, observations?
Now, the King James really retains that
Yeah.
structure.
Mhm.
It's looking at it in Hebrew.
It's almost Hebrew word order.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things have to change, like, okay, God created in Hebrew, it's, and created God,
Mhm.
you know, which
Right.
in Hebrew, a lot of times the verb comes before the subject, but, you know, it would sound awkward to translate.
Yeah.
And created God with the man.
Right. Makes it sound like God's being created in some way. But yeah, for the most part, it's Hebrew word order. And sometimes the Hebrew word order does play into some of the poetry of the Bible and in giving certain meaning, and also there's a reason why something is worded first when usually you wouldn't say it that way. Not so sure this has that example, but okay, let's flip to Job 37. I want to start off by mentioning that oftentimes we find synthetic parallelism in Isaiah and Job, for instance, especially. Remember that as we look at synthetic parallelism in biblical poetry, we see verse 1 and then verse 2 that follows, we find a continuation, a development, or what was said in the first verse, a completion of it. And so again, synthetic parallelism is also called this because on one hand, it is read as parallelism. It works as parallelism. Like, you know, reading the two verses as saying the same thing twice, or saying an opposite, being antithetical parallelism. But on the other hand, it really isn't parallelism because it comes off as just a complete sentence. But the way you need to read it is as if it is two parallel lines the second time it's completing or furthering what has been said. And so in that sense, it's the more difficult poetry of the Bible. And identifying it is a little harder. It'd be much easier if we were just reading the original Hebrew and we start seeing the poetry words and stuff used. So so yeah, this is, having a Bible that sets the poetry sections apart is very helpful, because that way you know what parts are the poetry and what parts aren't, just visually looking at it. So, Job 37. I chose this chapter simply because I noticed some interesting things going on. There's a lot of chapters in Job, and I didn't have one in particular, so I went with this. And we don't just find synthetic parallelism here, but we also find similar and contrasting ideas as well. So I'll read this in the KJV, and feel free to follow along, and we'll make some comments as we go. So this is Elihu speaking in Job 37. I'm going to read the first 14. We'll go through the first 14 verses. At this also my heart trembleth, and is moved out of his place. Sorry, Elihu speaks. At this also my heart trembleth, and is moved out of his place. Verse 2. Hear attentively the noise of his voice, and the sound that goeth out of his mouth. Okay, synonymous parallelism, right? His voice, his mouth, the noise, the sound, etc. He directeth it under the whole heaven, and his lightning unto the ends of the earth. Now here we get kind of a contrasting, heaven and earth, but similar in the sense of a territory of our planet. And then verse 4, after a voice roareth, he thundereth with the voice of his excellency, and he will not stay them with his voice when his voice is heard. So again, we got several, his voice roareth, he thundereth, the voice of his excellency, and his voice is heard. He will not stay them that when his voice is heard.
So his voice is mentioned 3 times.
Mm-hmm, yeah. You could almost make this almost call it like a stair step sort of thing. Like in Psalm 1, and there's several Psalms that do this, that'll say like, walk not in the counsel of the wicked, in the seat of scorners, in the third part, like it'll be like 1, 2, 3. Sometimes it goes 4, 5. And in Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses, it does it a few times as well. But yeah, after here, you could almost divide it up as after it, a voice roareth, next line, he thundereth, next line, with the voice of his excellency, next line, and he will not stay them when his voice is heard. It's kind of like a cap of that. So in verse 5, God thundereth marvelously with his voice. He's just going on and on about the Lord's voice. Great things doeth he, which he cannot comprehend. Now what do we have here? God thundereth marvelously with his voice. Great things doeth he, which he cannot comprehend.
Which we cannot comprehend.
Sorry. We have sort of a, God says marvelous, great things with his voice. He does great things, and we can't comprehend it. It's almost like a synthetical parallelism. It's bringing out the profundity of the first line regarding God's voice. And in verse 6 it says, for he saith to the snow, be thou on the earth, likewise to the small rain, and to the great rain of his strength. All of our snow melted this week, so we're just mud puddles and rain. For he saith to the snow, be thou on the earth. Again, his voice, he says, likewise to the small rain and to the great rain of his strength. So God commands all these elements. Is that what we're getting here? Oh, one thing to remind you guys with the three types of parallelism is, because the third type has three types in a way. Because when we look at synonymous parallelism, it's like it's saying the same thing twice. Again, that's debatable. A lot of people say, well, it doesn't say the same thing. Sometimes it does give us a little additional information without it being intensified. We have synonymous, and then antithetical is saying the opposite thing, contrasting two ideas. And then the third one, synthetic parallelism, which we kind of just talked about, is going to have that idea of completing or developing what the first line says. So in a way, it's kind of like we have the three types, but that third type has a third when you can say it develops or completes or expounds in some way. It unfolds what the first verse is saying, and through intensification. Any comments so far? We'll keep going here.
That statement, great things doeth he which we cannot comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
In my Bible, I'm going to make a little cross-reference to Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. It's just, so many things in life and the universe, we don't comprehend. And people need to learn to accept that.
Yeah.
Hey, God does things, he allows things, and
that's something for us to ponder and wonder about, but it's not a deal breaker for us because
he doesn't explain himself. He's not obligated to.
Yeah, that definitely comes with maturity because that sort of thing can make or break somebody, if they let it.
Another thing, kind of going off what Daniel's saying, is like keep telling us, science could, answer all these questions for us, but from what I see and someone else says is that science gives us even more questions as we continue to go deeper. And then
right.
Like, hey, there's still even more stuff we don't understand. After we dig into it.
That's right.
Talking right here, it's like God's voice is like thunderous. He tells the snow and the rain to pour, and the light rain to go. It's like we have a general knowledge of it, but yet when we go even further, it's like, wait, we still don't understand what causes all these things to come to pass, or how they even start or begin or end.
That's right.
That's a really good point that science raises more questions because, okay, you invent a microscope so you can see the cellular structure, and you find out life is a lot more complex than you realized, and so that raises, and you can invent a telescope to see, past the moon, and It's like there's even more to see and more unanswered
right.
questions.
Because like with the idea that God created everything, okay, well, there we go. Now we can think about all the intricacies, but with science, everything has to be, well, then what is this? And then it leads to something else, and now what about that? You know, and everything's looking at the answer. What could it be from a logical perspective?
Yeah, so poetry, you know, a lot of times when people hear that word poetry, they just think of, oh, something that's entertaining. And it is entertaining, if you want to use that word, but biblical poetry has some very profound,
Oh, yeah.
thought-provoking ideas that are communicated poetically. And
Thinking of the whole thought rhyme thing, it's like rhyming thought, not just word
Yeah.
sound, is way more challenging, and it you can feel, you know, the words can be stronger, that we can feel the depth or the vivid color of what is being said in a way. Like, you know, like we said, it's art, it's word art, and just like a painting can be powerful, or it can just be like, you know, a nice little thing to look at. It's, you know. Okay, so verse 7, it says, "He sealeth up the hand of every man, that all men may know his work." So here we have the idea of God's hand, or every man's hand, and that all may know his work. And we could kind of, it's almost like that hand is used again for when God works and what he created, that all men may know his work. Kind of like what we were just talking about, pondering creation. Verse 8, "Then the beasts go into dens and remain in their places." I mean, that's kind of just a continuation of the first line. "Then the beasts go into dens and remain in their places." But the idea, when you think about it a little bit, it's like, oh, these beasts, they go to their dens. They naturally, that's where they want to be at. So in verse 9, "Out of the south cometh the whirlwind, and cold out of the north." Almost all the time when the Bible mentions directions, it usually has a meaning of something, or when it says from this place to this place, it usually, if you look it up, it's like, oh, it's saying from east to west, or from north to south, or is giving you a border of, or something that's renowned for that territory. And I would love to have a Bible that, as footnotes, has what that is. Like every time it point out. I mean, here it's just simply saying the south and the north, was it? Yeah. And anyway, that just reminded me of that. In scripture, those kind of place names and directions usually play into the meaning of what is being said. It's not just some arbitrary, oh, from Hormah to wherever, you know, like. So verse 10, it says, "By the breath of God frost is given, and the breadth of the waters is straightened." I don't have the Hebrew there, but I'm sure that's ruach and water. Look at that. By the breath of God frost is given, like as if he blows the cold wind and makes things frost, and the breadth of the waters is straightened.
And the first one's the neshama, and then the second one's the ruach.
Oh, really?
Benishmat el, yeah. From the neshama of el, itin karach, beru, berocha, ein bibukis.
Well, the KJV has breadth, like the.
Oh, breath, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah,
And the-
I was wondering, it's not ruach.
Okay.
The breath of God is, yeah. Nishmat el is breath of God.
Ah. So, like some translation may say the soul.
New kara, frost or ice. Okay, rohab, yeah, like rahab is wide.
Oh, yeah.
Width.
Rahab.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's neshama.
The neshama, which is like the neck. Any breathing thing is, or no.
Well, lean
No.
shom, the verb to breathe is lean shom.
Lean
So
shom.
that nesham, yeah, it has to do, like the verb for breathe is lean shom, so that noon, sheen, mem, root has to do with breathing. So that's why they say the breath of God.
The breath,
So
right.
yeah, that would be an accurate translation. But, neshama, sometimes it's translated the spirit of man,
Right.
like. the
I know that's a whole
spirit.
other study, but yeah, the whole
Yeah.
neshama, ruach, and nefesh thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very good, yeah. So verse 11, also by watering he wearieth the thick cloud. He scattereth his bright cloud. So there we have the two things that's done with the cloud. The watering he wearieth the thick cloud, he scattereth his bright cloud. Verse 12, and it is turned round about by his counsels, that they may do whatsoever he commandeth them upon the face of the world in the earth.
So what is being turned around, the wind and the cloud? Because it sounds like he's describing a whirlwind.
Yeah, from verse
Sounds-
9.
Yeah.
Controlling the weather and the storms.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really important detail, Daniel. That's like what is being described here right after verse 9.
Because when Elihu's done talking, the Lord appears to Job
In a whirlwind,
In a
right.
whirlwind. So Elihu, whether he saw a physical whirlwind coming, or,
He was
a
inspired that way.
figurative,
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, verse 13 says, he causeth it to come, whether for correction, or for his land, or for mercy. That's a continuation there. Verse 14, hearken unto this, O Job, stand still, and consider the wondrous works of God. So like, listen up, Job, stand there and listen up. Consider the wondrous works of God. Lots to ponder in what the book of Job sets up. All these questions and observations that are brought up, and wow, just the fact that the book of Job is done in poetry. I mean, who can unlock all of its wisdom in that, in such a long book as well? But yeah, if you look in your Bible, if your Bible distinguishes the poetry from the prose, then you'll see just a very few parts are in regular narrative structure. So
I found a quote, I was trying to remember it, about the whole people thinking science has all the answers. It's from the scientist Werner Heisenberg, German scientist, of course. The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to flip to the book of Proverbs, but I want to say a few things first. The book of Proverbs is classified as wisdom literature. And I'm sorry, did anyone have any comments or observations on that, on Job? Okay. So, wisdom literature, the book of Proverbs. Right quick, it would be helpful to go over the structure of Proverbs. So, I'm sure a lot of you probably noticed this. The first 9 chapters contain an instructional discourse and lots of personification, like Lady Wisdom and such. The following chapters, 10 through 30, is what most people think of as the Proverbs. That's where you have all the proverbial wisdom. These verses are each their own thing, typically in couplet format, the two is a parallelism. We find lots of antithetical parallelism here in this part of Proverbs. Now, most of the stuff we've been looking at, we have found no antithetical parallelism. And I mentioned there's a book that mostly has, contrasting ideas, and that is certainly the book of Proverbs. So lastly, the final chapter of chapter 31, starting with verse 10, there is an acrostic poem, the woman of valor who can find, a virtuous woman who can find. And so those are the types of poetry that we get in the book of Proverbs. And so the metaphoric language in the first 9, and then 10 through 31, verse 9, we have the antithetical Proverbs, and then 31:10 we have an acrostic, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So each line for the letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So I want to specifically grab something using the contrasting or antithetical parallelism for us to read. So Proverbs 26, 1 through 12. Let's just kind of look at that. Proverbs 26, 1 through 12. Anyone besides Daniel or my wife know the Hebrew name of the book of Proverbs? All right, Daniel or my wife.
Or Mishle, Shlomo.
Mishle, oh yeah, Mishle song.
Yeah, Mishal is the word for Proverbs.
Yeah. Mishle, Shlomo. So I want you to notice the repeated theme of the fool in this section. When I was chose this, and I'm like, goodness gracious, look at that. So sometimes we see this theme, even though each verse is its own sort of thing, there's also connection with all of them with a particular motif, if you will. So, okay, verse 1, as in Proverbs 26, as snow in summer and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemly for a fool. What in the world does that mean?
It's out of place.
Just out of place.
Yeah, it doesn't belong, snow doesn't belong in the summer.
And notice the antithetical buildup with this, like contrast snow with summer, rain for harvest. Although here it does rain sometimes during harvest, but so honor is not the thing for a fool. Those are all like things that, just in case you didn't notice, think about that.
Yeah, a lot of the Proverbs are really humorous.
Oh yeah.
If you think about them.
Some of them are
They
hilarious.
just put a pic, like one of, I forget which one, where it says, describes a sluggard like a door on the hinges or something.
Car seat squeak.
Yeah.
Rolling over in bed, like.
Or he that blesses his friend with a loud voice in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to you. You know, you picture a guy, hey, good morning, brother, and oh,
Yes. And
bless you, brother.
some of the, a lot of times Proverbs gets accused of being contradictory, but it's like we don't know the tone of voice in some of these, and some of these you can say it in a different way just by the inflection of your voice, and it will say something totally different. And I don't have an example of that, but maybe I'll find one.
And sarcasm, too.
Because people say, well, so here it says this, and then
Yeah.
here it says this.
Yeah,
It's the exact opposite.
yeah.
To read different things.
So in verse 2, it says, as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying. So it's a buildup of not just a bird, but now a swallow. So the curse causeless shall not come.
Yeah.
So as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. All right, let's derive the meaning out of this real quick as we kind of go along. Not every single one, but.
Well, if somebody tries to curse you, if they don't have any legitimate cause to curse you, just let it fly over your head.
Yeah, like a bird.
That we don't have to fear any curses from, sometimes I think Christians, they get kind of paranoid of, like Halloween. Oh man, there's gonna be witches putting curses on us.
Yeah.
We shouldn't fear any curses from witches.
Right.
If they don't have, if there's no cause for us to be cursed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to become paranoid and
Yeah.
superstitious with
Yeah.
things, especially in cultures that do that, bank on that a lot. So in verse 3 it says, a whip for the horse, a bridle for the ass, and a rod for the fool's back. It doesn't even make the point, it just simply gives you a list.
Yeah.
It's saying all these things, this, and this. And it's like, yeah, like Daniel's expression here, it's like, that's hilarious. It's like, a lot of times in comedy is funny because one of the aspects of comedy is that someone can relate to it. Oh my gosh, yes, I also connect with what you just said. That's funny. Is that just true? Now, of course, it's making an assumption that not all fools, have all these things that they should be done to them or whatever.
Yeah, because like the picture I get here is like some horses are not gonna move until you crack the whip, at least threatening with the whip. And some.
They've been trained that way.
Yeah, and the ass won't go the right direction he's supposed to go without the bridle to pull at him.
Mhm.
And some people are like that. Well, like Isaiah says in the first chapter, the ox knoweth his owner, the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider.
Right.
So it's the same, basically what Isaiah said.
Basically, yeah.
Some people are, you're just too stubborn or too stupid, and God has to use a rod sometimes to get you to go in the right direction.
It's like the basest way of asking a human to do something or hinting at it, like, oh yeah, so yeah. 5, again, all fool. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. What do we have here? Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit.
Well, we got verse 4 before that, though, which.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I skipped that. Oh, yeah, let's go back. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Not playing his game, so to speak.
Yeah.
You guys know what the Hebrew word for fool is?
Naval, I think, is one. I don't know which one's used here. What yours we got for?
Oh, that's right. The typical word is naval, like Nabal in the book
Yeah.
of Samuel.
Casil is used here.
Oh, it is. So it's a
Casil.
poetic word.
Yeah.
The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. It's like Nabal plays into that. But this is the word what? What's that?
Casil.
Casil. Okay, I'm definitely not familiar with that.
Casil.
Casil. Interesting. Wonder, is that the word for most of these then?
I think,
In this chapter?
I think, yeah, I've never done a word count of comparison, but
Yeah. Interesting.
that'd be an interesting. And I don't know if there's much difference between the Naval and the Casil. I don't know, if there's any difference in the nuance of one or the other.
Right.
I know Naval can also be translated like a churl, which is a word we don't use much, like a jerk.
Right.
A Naval is a jerk, like Nabal was.
Right.
He was a jerk the way he treated David.
Right.
And Casil might just be more like a clueless person.
Gotcha. Yeah, there might be some nuance of
Maybe
difference.
do some study of different words for fool.
So yeah, okay, so, and then following that, we have a similar, notice the parallelism of verse 4 and 5, how they both start, answer not a fool according to his folly, answer a fool according to his folly. So we have like an opposite, but saying it very similarly. Lest he be wise in his own conceit, right? Feeding his ego, if you will, and his foolish ways. So in verse 6, he that sendeth a message by the hand of a fool cutteth off the feet and drinketh damage. Now here we have hand and feet is working together. Sendeth and cutteth off, hand of a fool and drinketh damage. So he that sendeth a message by the hand of a fool cutteth off the feet and drinketh damage. I guess that's just kind of more of an intensification of the idea that he that sendeth a message by the hand of a fool who entrusts something important to someone foolish, cutteth off the feet and drinketh damage. Like, I don't know, is it saying like, might as well cut off the feet and drink poison? Like, that would be just as smart.
The word damage here, kamas.
Violence.
Yeah.
The Hamas. Drinketh. Oh, that's interesting.
And the fool here is Casil again.
Okay, well, let's go through a few more verses here. The legs of the lame are not equal, verse 7. So is a parable in the mouth of fools. So like someone who's lame and a fool with a parable in his mouth. Similar, right? But used as kind of opposites here to show how they're the same.
Yeah, like if a fool tries to share a parable, it's like, you're not, the comparison you're making doesn't match up. It's like this leg's longer than that leg.
Right.
Kinda like when you have a 4-year-old tell a joke.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good way.
Like, just ask a silly question.
He's not
and
too
give a
balanced.
silly answer, it might
Yeah.
not match
Not
up.
too balanced, right. Okay, verse 8. Proverbs 26, verse 8, he says, as he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that giveth honor to a fool. What does that mean? He that bindeth a stone in a sling.
I think binding a stone in a sling is like tying it in, so
Yeah.
it's not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gluing it,
It's
like,
just wasted.
Yeah.
that way I won't lose it. Wait a minute.
Amelia Bedelia or something.
Verse 9, as a thorn goeth up into the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouths of fools. Interesting. The thorn that goeth into the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouth of the fools. Boy, that really is like, when you look at it as comparison or contrasting, it's just like, it makes it totally different in a way. I mean, typically we just read the Proverbs that way anyway, but making that note, as a thorn goeth up into the hand of a drunkard, just as a thorn gets into the hand of a drunk person,
Yeah, felt.
so is the parable in the mouth of fools.
It'd do more harm than good.
Yeah, it's just like, don't talk. Verse 10, it says, the great God that formed all things, both rewardeth the fool and rewardeth transgressors. Wow. Now, what does that do reading that? We can sit here and think, oh, I'm so glad I'm not a fool. Pat myself on the back. And then all of a sudden we read that, right? The great God that formed all things, both rewardeth the fool and rewardeth transgressors. But the idea that fool and transgressors, God made all people and can reward the fool and the
They
transgressors.
reap what they sow. They get what they deserve.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, such is the path of the fool, all these different things that we had just read. Now in the next verse, if you're a dog owner, don't be offended. The Bible does refer to dogs in a pejorative term always. Dogs were scavengers and wild animals at that time. And we know at some point, like Egypt, they were worshiping cats. Like they deified their cats. So like cats and dogs were not at all a thing like we have in America. Like, oh, cats versus dogs. But the dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. So kind of gross.
Yeah.
Dogs are scavengers, returning to his vomit. So in the same way, a fool returns to his folly, just keeps going back to it. And then in verse 12, seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There is more hope of a fool than of him. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There is more hope of a fool than of him. Questions, observations. And like I said, I was demonstrating the idea that even though these are all one-off and antithetical in the sense of comparing opposites, it's never just that simple either. Comparing opposites to show how they're the same. And then also all of those 12 verses, and I think it may keep going, are all the same theme of the fool. All of those. So that's just one example in Proverbs. And there's typically more wisdom than what you just think by just reading one verse. And in that case, you pull out one of those verses, you're pulling out the before and after. So yeah. All right, if there's no questions, to the scroll of Isaiah we shall go. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, we're trying to get a feel for the different styles of poetry in Scripture via parallelism. And we're going to see some synthetical parallelism here in Isaiah, quoted often. So, again, synthetic parallelism needs to be read as parallelism, like saying the same thing twice or saying things that are opposite, like we just read in the book of Psalm or Proverbs, but technically is not parallelism because, but again, it's read as but not technically can be kind of complicated, but in the way of developing or completing a thought of the first verse is what we get in synthetic parallelism. So we will see some antithetical and synonymous parallelism here, some metaphoric language, and some sound or word play as well, included here in the first 7 verses. So I've been trying to pick as an example for us to just go over some things that has something unique with it. And so in this sense, there's some very interesting sound play. Remember, metaphor is something, something's described, it is this, and a simile is, it is like this. And we have lots of this in the Bible. And, especially I can't describe this in human language, it's like this, and it's like that, Revelation, Ezekiel, and stuff. So the vineyard owner here is God, and the vineyard is Israel, basically. And John 15, it made me think of John 15, plays on this as well, but instead of God and Israel, it's Messiah and his disciples. And so it's a very unique parallel with that. So Isaiah 5, 1 through 7, he says, "Now will I sing to my well-beloved, a song of my beloved, touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill." In verse 2, "And he fenced it." Now this is kind of like I said with the stair-step idea in poetry. Neither does he sit in the council of the wicked, nor in the seat of scorners, and I forget the third part. But anyway, you have this stair-step, and sometimes it's like a list. The Apostle Paul does this a lot in his letters. Like I said, I swear that there's poetry that in a lot of Paul's epistles. And it says, "And he fenced it, and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes." Hey, Alex. So, so this vineyard that's on a very fruitful hill is protected. The stones are gathered around, planted with the choicest vine. There's a tower in the midst of it, a wine press. It's fruitful and abundant and beautiful and plenteous. Okay, and it brought forth grapes, even wild grapes. Stuff I planted, stuff I didn't even plant, Okay, in verse 3, it says, "And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard." And in verse 4, let's continue. It says, "What could have been done more to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Wherefore, when I looked that it should bring forth grapes, brought it forth wild grapes." Here he goes again with the grapes, even the wild grapes. What more, it's like you, the reader, the listener, what more could have been added to the vineyard that you just read about, okay? That I have not done, that I've not done already. This is God's being generous and gracious to his people.
Yeah, it's basically a rhetorical question.
Mm-hmm.
What more could I have done? I provided everything
Above and beyond,
that I should have expected good fruit instead of the wild grapes.
Yeah, it's like we get this 2 kinds of grapes, and you can see that, like good fruit and not cultivated fruit, like he'd say not good fruit, bad intentions, stupid stuff that people do that, maybe they just do it out of the moment or whatever, or maybe it's intentional. So in verse 5, it says, now go to, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. Okay, so we have a parallelism there of synonymous. Take away the hedge thereof, break down the wall thereof, it shall be eaten up, it shall be trodden down. So Isaiah 5 verse 6, and I will lay it waste, it shall not be pruned, nor digged, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. Okay, so now what do we have? We have a little bit of a, it's in a way 5 and 6, the verses itself are a parallelism, aren't they? In a way that like the judgment that's coming, how this is going to be dealt with the wild grapes, the unrighteous of his people. Verse 7, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. Here we just explained the parable here. And the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for judgment, but behold oppression. For righteousness, but behold a cry. All right. So, I want to read that again, that last verse. This is where we get into some really cool wordplay. And this is like a prime example of classical wordplay in Hebrew poetry in the book of Isaiah. It's not a lot, it doesn't happen often, but this is just a classic example. It says, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for judgment, but behold oppression, for righteousness, and behold a cry. Any other translation there, that last part of verse 7? You want to have another translation of that? I just want to hear something different.
Verse 7. I got TLD for the vineyard of Adonai is the house of Israel and the people of Judah, the planting of his delight. He looked for justice, but behold bloodshed, for righteousness, but behold a cry.
Okay, justice and bloodshed. So I want you to hear translator Robert Alter's version of Isaiah 5:7. He says, for the house of Israel is the vineyard of the Lord of armies. Now I want you to notice anything unusual with this. And men of Judah are his delightful planting. He hoped for justice, and look, jaundice, for righteousness, and look, wretchedness. Alliteration. What time do we have, by the way? My phone is taking. Okay, good. So, very interesting. Here's the Hebrew. Here's the line in Hebrew. V'yakav lemishpat, v'hinei mishpach. L'tzadacha, v'hinei tza'acha. It's saying two words that sound similar but mean the opposite. Mishpat, mishpach. Tzedakah, tzedakah. So Robert Alter is trying to retain, he said, he had to kind of, what do you call it? Kind of, like to, he hoped for justice, and look, jaundice, for righteousness, and look, wretchedness. He said, I know jaundice is a specific illness, but, so you can hear the sound play there. Again, v'yakav lamishpat, v'hinei mishpach, behold, but instead this, l'tzedakah, v'hinei tza'acha. So, he looked for mishpat, justice, but behold, mishpach, oppression. For tzedakah, righteousness, but behold, tza'acha, a cry. So Alter tries to preserve the sound play by use of alliteration, justice, jaundice, righteousness, wretchedness, and only audibly, because even visually, righteousness and wretchedness start with R and W. So the question is, which is right? Translate the message literally or portray the sound play? After all, that is what the inspired text says, and sure, this would be debatable. Interestingly enough, we have a particular example of another word or sound play example in Psalm 104:12 in the Masoretic Hebrew versus the Greek Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Tanakh, of the Old Testament. So if you want to look at that or just listen, Psalm 104 verse 12. By them shall the oaf, fowls or birds, of the heavens have their habitation, which sing among the Ophium branches. So by them shall the oaf, the birds of the heaven, have their habitation, which sing among the Ophium branches. You hear that, oaf and Ophium, the wordplay. Reading it as parallelism, you see that. So in the Septuagint, I know that's a whole other subject. A lot of people prefer the Septuagint. Paul sometimes quotes from the Septuagint. But the Septuagint is a translation. It is not the original text. It is a Greek translation of the Hebrew. But we can learn a lot about it. We can learn lots of words that are used in the New Testament, how they're quoting the common word for, used in the translation of the Septuagint. When you're reading about the Septuagint, and even in my notes, LXX, right? The Roman numerals for 70, the 70 the translators who translated it all together. And so yeah, in the Septuagint, they retained the wordplay and not the direct translation, which I thought was interesting. Because at most, you would say, at least, I would love a Bible translation to have as a footnote, by the way, this is a wordplay, right? Because a lot of times this doesn't always translate into other language. So they took it that the sound play should take precedence over the literal meaning in the Septuagint as being more important. So the English translation of Psalm 104:12 in the LXX, in the Septuagint, it says, the birds, patina, of the heavens dwell with them. From among the rocks, petron, they lift up a voice. So they try to retain the wordplay of patina, petron, rather than a literal meaning of birds and branches, which in English works as alliteration, birds and branches. So you can hear the sound play, patina, and petron. So it preserves the alliteration over the literal translation. So why would the translators of the Septuagint do that? So I think most Bible translators would not agree with that today. Robert Alter, of course, would. His literary translation tries to portray what the Hebrew does and use Hebrew word order and sound play and all that kind of stuff. But why would the translators of the Septuagint do that? Why would they think it's more important to have the sound play than the literal meaning? Any thoughts?
Maybe because it makes it easier to remember.
Easier to remember, like if someone's going to
That's the
memorize
only
it?
reason I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Or just wanting to retain, not wanting to lose that aspect of the original.
Yeah, is it possible that it loses the delivery quality by it not doing that? Like, if you were to translate Dr. Seuss into another language and none of it rhymed, or do you think they're going to make it, twist it and paraphrase it so that it rhymes in Latin or whatever? Not Latin, but it's a dead language.
Dr. Seuss and get the Cat in the Hat in Latin.
But like, you know what I mean? It would be like, you can get Dante's Inferno, which is entirely a poem. And, I have a version where they do try to make it rhyme in English. And then one that's, no, let's just do the literal. And none of it rhymes. And I found myself like not liking the one that didn't rhyme at all. Because the original, it all rhymes. And so it just feels like an attempt at a translation. But compromises do have to be made when you translate Hebrew into English, and so justice, jaundice, Yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, we had a Cat in the Hat in Hebrew. I think Shoshana had it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it before.
Ta'alul. But
Yeah.
Ta'alul doesn't mean in the hat.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
They did make it rhyme in Hebrew.
Cat and
but of course
something
that's
else.
not scripture, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
If they retain the literal.
Yeah, I would say that at least a footnote would be required to say, hey, just so you know. So yeah. But yeah, the Septuagint passage is simply an example where they chose to portray the sound play over what the passage literally says. And so that was more important as part of the delivery of the message than to lose that. So I know that could lead into an entire discussion or topic on translation and that, but maybe another time. So does anyone, we're gonna close here, but does anyone have any psalms that they would like to go over? Like you have a favorite psalm, and boy, wouldn't it be cool if there's some crazy thing that was going on with the psalm that is my favorite psalm regarding the poetry that it is involved in. Let me grab a pen real quick. Like I have a whole list of favorite psalms, and there's a few that I want to go over with you guys because it introduces something interesting in the poetic sense. Give me a few psalms, you guys. Throw me a few psalms that you like.
116.
116. 117, anyone? Anyone? Is that anyone's favorite? The shortest psalm that there is? What's another one?
I guess the general favorite one for me is Psalm 23.
Psalm 23. There we go. That's some interesting things going on with it.
I was gonna say 84, but did you go over that last week when I was here?
What's that?
Did we? We sang the Psalter version of it.
Okay, because I think we you started to say it the week before that, but then we ran out of time.
I think so. If it's not, that's one that I definitely want to go over. I think we did it because I remember I had the Psalter, and we sang it to Amazing Grace. You can do the Psalter version of Psalm 84. I was like, it's kind of weird, but this was going to tie into the study. So yeah, Psalm 84. I want to do 95. Anyone else? Oh man, I have a big long list of songs, my favorite psalms. Psalm 119, not 119, 119 definitely, but Psalm 1, Psalm 19, Psalm 23, Psalm 29, just 84, 95, yeah, just a lot of psalms that I like. We'll go over some of these, and next week too, since we went over Job and Isaiah and such like that for poetry, I want to look at some of the Psalms, because the Psalms uses a very unique, another one, 131, poetry style. In the various Psalms that there is, you'd be surprised at some of the stuff that is involved with the different Psalms and its poetic style. So let's go ahead and close there, and then we'll get ready for service shortly. So guys, thank you for your time.